Hey, good morning. I'm Noah from Hearts Open Wide and the band Waking Bear. And today I want to share about the differences between having a good cry and having a bad cry. If you don't remember the last time you had a good cry, or if you've never had a good cry, then what I have to share might be really helpful. I've got a lot of experience with crying. It's been a huge, important part of my journey because it's part of healing. It's part of releasing extreme feelings and beliefs that we took on in childhood or dealing with grief. Speaking of grief, my dad passed away the day after my birthday in 2020, and that was 7 months after my mom passed. During this time, I had a lot of friends ask me how I could possibly be handling the death of both parents so close together, and what helped me was having good cries. I know though so many people struggle with crying. If you grew up in a family in which healthy, safe crying wasn't modeled by your parents, or in a family in which feelings or vulnerability were shamed or ridiculed, or if you were teased for crying, learning to have a good cry could be really good for you. You might not know how good it can feel to have a release. You might not trust that you'll get through to the other side of the pain and actually feel better. So I want to share with you a little bit about how crying works. A good cry happens when you're embodying self-compassion as you cry. You're looking at yourself with unconditional love and acceptance, the way a loving parent or a loving grandparent might look at you. And this sweetness, this tenderness, will prevent you from falling into what might feel like an endless black hole of pain. And this sweetness will prevent you from feeling overwhelmed by the grief or the sadness, and you will feel so much better after having a good cry. In contrast, a bad cry happens when your self-compassion is blocked. And often what's blocking this self-compassion is either fear of being overwhelmed, which I just talked about, or self-criticism. The criticism is often a mirror of our childhood. It's an internalized copy of the criticism you receive from others. You're typically caregivers or parents, but it could be anybody, peers. When you were a kid and you cried, or you were vulnerable, and you were teased, ridiculed, shamed. But the thing is, we need to cry. And if you hold yourself with love while you cry, letting your body shake, letting your body spasm, letting yourself be as loud as you need to, letting snot run down your face, and feel what you need to feel, it really will get the sad out of you. And what some people learn as babies is that when they cry, they're actually comforted. And so that's what we need to learn if we're going to have a good cry, that it's comforting, that it feels good to cry. That's why we call it a good cry. So let's just imagine this for a minute. Imagine you have a baby and you hear your baby crying from its crib in the other room. Trust me that the baby will not feel better if you ignore her. Your baby is trying to tell you something. She's hungry, maybe she's cold, maybe she's tired. We don't know. But what we know for certain is that if you go to your baby, gently pick her up and hold her, let her cry it out, the baby will eventually feel your warmth, feel your loving heart, and she'll begin to relax. Yes, she might need to be fed or she might need to be changed. But what you've just done is you've soothed your baby. And the baby is learning one of the most fundamental pieces of emotional health, self-soothing. And the more a child is comforted by their caregivers, the more likely a child will grow up knowing how to comfort themselves and to have good cries. Of course, many of us were not adequately comforted by our parents or our caregivers. Many of us don't know how to self-soothe. If you're like me, you may have turned to food or sex, drugs, alcohol, or other distractions instead of crying. There's nothing wrong with this. Learning to cry as a grown-up, that's okay. It's all part of the journey. But I do want to suggest that if you can't remember the last time you cried, you probably need to. Crying truly does get the sad out of you, and I encourage you to have the fearlessness to go into those feelings and to take care of yourself. I wish you the best. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you next time.